again from the 7th round of the US Chess Championship. Standings before the round, Nakamura in tied 5th on 50%. He has drawn all his games. So a disappointing showing so far by Nakamura, who most people expected to be contending for the title. So this game was kind of the last chance to join the guys at the top, and he had to go for a win here. And well, his opponent is a strong one, Izoria. He already shown by beating Caruana, and in this game Nakamura decided to go for his kingside fianchetto, and this fianchetto can turn into a modern or a king's Indian depending on what white does. But white goes for e4, which means that this will most likely be a modern defense. d4, d6, well, I can still make it a king's Indian with c4, but he plays bishop to c4. Now this setup in conjunction with queen to e2 was mentioned by Hillar Persson in his book, and he called it a mad dog to describe the potential complications that can arise, and white's idea is to quickly push e5, and this is a very dangerous system. I think he's recommending knight c6 there, but Nakamura played knight f6, and after queen e2, castles, castles. We might be transposing here with knight c6, and now e5 is looking quite dangerous. Where to put the knight? Nakamura went with knight g4, which is not necessarily the best. Maybe we can put it on h5. If we put it on d7, white might start pushing with e6, which can become very iffy. So it seems like the knight must go forward, and e8 is too passive. So Nakamura went with knight g4, probably trying to initiate some complications. But this means that the knight must go to h6, which is not the best square, but it might re-emerge via f5. Izoria went knight c3. Okay, development and stopping black from going d5. And now king to f8 by h8 by Nakamura. Maybe he should have brought the knight in. But king to h8, he must be thinking about moving the f pawn at some point, or a square for the knight, which you don't want to do, but maybe you have to in some lines. Rook d1, so white is centralizing his pieces nicely. a6, a3. So Izoria doesn't go a4 to prevent b5, he prefers a3 to give his bishop this square and just keep the structure more solid, and take squares away from your opponent. b5, bishop comes to d5 now, bishop to b7. So we're keeping this square in reserve. At some point black might play e6, and then this square could become useful. Bishop f4 was played. In case of queen to e4, black can defend the knight on c6 with his queen. So bishop f4, queen c8 now. He's protecting this so he can move the knight. But notice that white is keeping a clamp on this pawn here, or with this pawn. And he's securing a nice space advantage. And black has yet to coordinate his pieces. This knight on h6, for instance, it's not a good piece. So white keeps the space advantage, more centralized pieces, and a good structure. So he tries to keep the control. Bishop to e4, rook b8, envisioning some activity on the b file later in the game by pushing b4, rook to e1. So it looks like Izoria wants to bring the other rook and have this classical centralized rook. D takes e5, d takes e5. So this pawn, very important, keeps the space advantage, and this is what has secured Izoria the better game so far in this game. Knight d8, no, centralization. Okay, to d1, knight e6, and okay, with the bishop being attacked, we don't take here, giving up the bishop pair, but bishop c1, just getting out of the way. The bishop is still on this diagonal eyeing the knight, but importantly on c1, Okay, this is not really important to protect this, but we're getting out of the way of our heavy pieces who are lined up on the center files. So the bishop is not in the way. Bishop to c1. Knight to g8. What to do? It seems like Nakamura's strategy has been, yeah, somewhat, it's not working. I mean, you don't want the knight on g8. Okay, he was trying to initiate some complications, but he has, he's just worse here, so he's just defending. Rook takes b7, queen to e4, centralized queen, and now a nice centralized knight after pawn to c5. Nakamura is trying to make something happen on the queen side with c4, and he has this nice blockading knight, so Izoria decides to get rid of it with knight to g5. Takes, and queen to f5. Trying to limit the pressure on his position by initiating a queen trade, but Izoria doesn't want it yet. He plays knight to c3. He wants to enter the trade on his own terms. Rook f to b8. Black's position looks rather suspect, but at least he has some ideas of counterplay here. Bishop now goes back to c1 as it's now hanging. Of course, rook f to b8 was simply to protect the rook. We should mention that. And now bishop c1. The bishop was attacked. Again, he doesn't want to take on f5, because then black would probably, you know, escape. The knight would come into the game, e6, knight e7, and things might be okay. And also, very importantly, if we take on f5, let's just do a quick look. We've taken away the e4 square for a knight, which is very important. We don't want to do that. So bishop c1. And now a5, okay. Nakamura trying to get counterplay on the queen side. g4, white wants to get the queen trade on his own terms on e4, not on f5. But Nakamura doesn't want it now. He goes back to c8, queen to f3, freeing the e4 square for the knight. Like I said, very important. And the only way to get this guy into the game is to play e6, which Nakamura does now. But this horribly weakens the d6 and f6 square. But it's a necessary evil to get the knight into the game. So white takes advantage of this immediately with knight to bishop f4 first, of course. Why? To defend the pawn on e5. After knight e7, now we can put knight e4, and the pawn is not attacked. So yeah, this beautiful knight is eyeing these squares. Oops, what the hell happened there? Oh, hang on a minute. Okay, we were here. I clicked something very crazy. Okay, so 94, yeah, eyeing these squares. But also we have this square here. So very strong knight. Rook c7. Well, the immediate threat was of course to come here and fork basically all of the pieces. So rook c7, bishop to g3. Still black is really cramped. It's just a wonderful position for white. You can't take even on f6 because this would open an attack here. Rook c to b8, rook d6, and g5 by black. Okay, trying to get the knight to at least give it a square on g6 to consider. Knight to d7, queen to e8, knight back to f6, and not doubling on the d-file. So just total domination by white. I mean, Nakamura hasn't had a chance in this game. No chance whatsoever, and this is just an overwhelming position for white, and he has basically been outplaying Nakamura very nicely. h6. The knight comes to d7. I think he's trying to get to the time control here. It's move 36. Izoria has 2 minutes, so he's repeating. He has a good position, so it's a nice technique to repeat the position, and you know, then go on and reach move 40, and then you can think. But Nakamura, he goes for it by taking on f6. Not going for the repetition, but this could backfire after c3, b3. White has now reached the time control, and he's still in control of the position. He has control of the only open file. Well, not the only open file, but he has control of the most important open file. and this knight still hasn't really gotten into the game. It's being dominated by this bishop at the moment, and yeah, a strong pawn on f6. So all in all, white is keeping a big advantage here. Rook a6. Okay, he's eyeing the a4 pawn. e5. And now, perhaps earlier white could have played better or utilized this advantage in a different way. But Izoria saw a way to just win a pawn and go to an endgame up a pawn. And against a guy like Nakamura, I mean, you avoid all complications and you get an ending that he might win. So that looks very tempting. And that's basically what happened after rook a5. Okay, you're going to lose this, but get this. So rook e8, rook to d5. And rook takes f6. If we push him, baby, pawn to e4. Yeah, we can protect the pawn here. We can play rook d6 maybe. But I think protecting is just looks pretty good. But Nakamura, he took an f6. And this just feels like it is simplifying a bit too easily for white. He takes on e5, bishop takes. We're going to regain the exchange, of course, here. So white is up a pawn. A nice pass pawn, so Nakamura goes after it. Okay, looks like he's coming back and equaling the material. But the fact of the matter is that this pawn here is a sitting duck. King is coming over and he's gonna capture the pawn. So now Izoria is just up a pawn in a rook ending. And, well, they say all rook endings are drawn, but the defense, it's still quite tricky. King came to e6. King to e4. Has to go back now, f6, f3. And we'll just go quickly over the moves here. Okay, f4 to... now at least we have the rook protecting on the third rank. Rook c5. Okay, yeah. Starting to push the pawn. So white is trying to keep control of his king side and slowly but surely push the pawn. King back to g3. And now to g2. And now he pushes the pawn. I think black is... at this point, it looks like he might be very close to a draw. But Nakamura fails in the defense here. He plays king to e6. Now white goes for the kingside pawns. King comes back and rook f3. And from here, white manages to activate his king. Perhaps, okay, should he have stayed with the king on e5? Maybe, but then you have to find some waiting moves. And after the king comes to f4, it looks like white is making some progress now because the king is getting ready to help this pawn. c4, and now the rook gets behind the pawn. So it's hard to pinpoint, you know, maybe one move. It just looks like slowly but surely Nakamura is making some inaccuracies, and now he's actually in trouble because the rook is behind the pawn. So now you have to sacrifice either the king or the rook to block it, but then you open up ways for white to simply go after your king side, and that's what happened here. Rook f2, rook f3 now. Okay, giving up the c6 pawn eventually. But okay, now white is up 2 pawns. This is gonna draw, but the king is too far away. Rook c5, and this is just, well, there's nothing to be done really. Rook c5, rook h8, the pawn is just gonna run. Okay, you get the pawn finally, but the king is too far away. h6, rook g1, king h7, and after rook here, Nakamura resigned. Yeah, it's fairly easy from here on out. You just play rook here. And the main problem for black is once you give a check, I come to the 7th, and you can't exchange, of course, because the pawn is coming. And if you mirror king, I go here, and the next 2 moves are here. So he can't go to the 7th. If you go to the 8th, I play king g7, I'm threatening this. Now you give a check, now go to the corner. I'm threatening this. If you give a check now, I play rook g8. And the pawn is coming. Okay, rook here, then again, I go here. So rook somewhere else. And I push the pawn, push it baby, rook e7, rook here. And yeah, the king is just going to escape. So Nakamura had to resign in this position right here. So another nice win by Izoria. I mean, this doesn't put him in contention because he lost some early games, but he's making a nice name for himself, defeating both Caruana and Nakamura in this tournament. And he basically just ended any chance that Nakamura had of contending in this tournament, and he is now out of the running in the US Chess Championship 2018, and for sure this is the worst US Chess Championship ever for Nakamura. And yeah, he will want to forget this tournament as soon as possible, and to make matters worse, he still has to face So and Caruana. So yeah, we'll see soon what happens in those games, but yeah, for now, I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.